For as long as people had lived in cities, there had been whispers of strange occurrences within the labyrinths of their towering buildings. No one quite knew when it started, but it was said that certain elevators were portals to a nightmare that could take anyone to a place they could never return from. This was a legend known simply as elevator terror. It was a cold winter evening when Jenny, a curious young woman in her mid-20s, first heard the story from her friend, Clara. Jenny had just started working as a receptionist in a tall, modern office building in downtown Portland. The office was located on the 13th floor, and though it wasn't quite the highest of the floors, it still felt oddly isolated and out of reach compared to the bustle of the street below. One evening, after the office had emptied for the night, Clara had mentioned the elevator in a hushed voice. She had worked at the building for over 2 years and knew the ins and outs of it. She was careful with her words when she spoke of the elevator in the corner of the building. "You've heard of it, right?" Clara asked. "The one that said to go somewhere else." Jenny had raised an eyebrow, not sure if Clara was just messing with her. "What do you mean somewhere else?" she asked, trying to dismiss the notion. Clara glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in. "The 13th floor. It's not like the others. I've heard the elevator that's near the back doors sometimes doesn't go to the regular floors." Jenny's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, doesn't go to the regular floors? Isn't that just a broken elevator?" Clara shook her head. No. People who've used it say it can take you to a completely different place, somewhere you shouldn't go." "I'm not kidding, Jenny. I've heard stories of people going in, only to find themselves in another dimension, or somewhere else entirely. It's like the elevator is a door to something darker. There's no explanation for it. It's just a legend, but I've heard it from more than one person." Jenny was intrigued, but her rational mind dismissed the idea as nothing more than an urban legend. "Sounds like a spooky story," she said, with a nervous laugh. "But hey, maybe I'll check it out one of these nights just for fun." Clara's eyes widened. "Don't," she warned, her voice trembling. "I've seen things that I can't explain. People who went in never came back the same, or didn't come back at all." Jenny shrugged it off. Clara was just a little jumpy, that was all. "I'll be fine," she assured her friend. As the days passed, Jenny couldn't stop thinking about Clara's strange warning. The building was large and old in certain parts, with a certain eerie ambiance that often sent shivers down her spine. The old elevator near the back doors, however, was rarely used. Most employees preferred the newer, more convenient lifts at the front. The strange, outdated lift seemed to be reserved for those who didn't know any better, or those who had no choice. It was late one night, when the office was empty, and the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead echoed through the halls, that Jenny found herself standing alone in front of the old elevator. The stories from Clara still rang in her ears. She figured it was just a rumor, something that people told each other to spook the newcomers. It had to be. But as Jenny stepped inside the elevator, the atmosphere changed. The doors closed with an eerie screech, and she pressed the button for the 13th floor. The elevator groaned and jolted for a moment, and she immediately regretted her decision. The feeling of being watched washed over her, and the walls seemed to grow closer as the air grew heavy. When the doors opened, Jenny's stomach dropped, wasn't the 13th floor that she found herself stepping into. She stood in a long hallway, lined with walls of crumbling wallpaper and peeling paint. The air was stale and smelled of mildew, a far cry from the pristine modernity of the office building she knew. The overhead lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced along the floor. The walls stretched for what seemed like miles, and the silence in this space was unsettling, broken only by the soft echo of her footsteps. It was a world that didn't belong in the building, a world that should never have existed. Jenny's heart pounded as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. The elevator doors had disappeared, leaving only a narrow door at the end of the hallway. For some strange reason, she couldn't bring herself to walk toward it. Something in her gut told her that the door led to something far worse. The walls began to close in, slowly at first, and Jenny felt a strange pressure pushing down on her chest. The air grew colder, and the lights flickered once more, casting eerie shadows over the floor. Then she heard the sound, a soft, distorted voice calling her name. Jenny. The voice was raspy, like the wind howling through the cracks of a forgotten tomb. Frozen in place, Jenny tried to make sense of what was happening. Her breath became shallow, and she instinctively reached for her phone to call for help. But when she checked, she noticed something horrifying. Her phone had no signal, no service. It was as if this place existed outside the bounds of reality. Suddenly, a cold breeze brushed past her, sending a chill down her spine. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hall, but there was no one there. Jenny's mind raced, her pulse quickening. Her legs felt like they were made of lead as she turned and bolted down the hallway, desperate to find her way back to the elevator, to escape. But the hallway stretched on and on, its twisting turns creating an impossible maze. She ran for what seemed like hours, but every corner she turned only brought her deeper into the labyrinth. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the oppressive silence made it feel like she was being suffocated. As she stumbled down the narrow, dark corridor, she finally heard something that froze her in her tracks. A low, guttural growl coming from the shadows. Someone was following her. Jenny's mind raced. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned, ready to face whatever monstrosity had been stalking her. But there was nothing, just the sound of her own rapid breathing and the distant echoes of her footsteps. But as she continued to run, something more sinister began to unfold. She wasn't alone. The shadows began to move, their shapes twisting and shifting as if alive. And then, from the corner of her eye, she saw them. Figures standing in the distance, silent and unmoving. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their faces obscured by darkness, their eyes glowing with an eerie red light. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. Her feet felt heavier, as if the ground itself was trying to pull her down. She could barely breathe. The figures started moving toward her, their eyes fixed on her with a cold, unwavering gaze. "Help me," she cried, but her voice was lost in the void. Then, as if by some strange force, she was pulled backward, falling into the shadows themselves. Just before everything went black, Jenny felt a presence, an unseen hand that grabbed her arm with a vice-like grip, pulling her into the depths of the void. The last thing she saw was the faint light of the elevator door, just a few feet away, flickering like a distant star. But it was too late. Hours later, Clara would be the one to find the elevator, its doors slightly ajar, as if it were waiting for her. Jenny was never seen again. No one knew where she had gone, and no one dared to ask. And as for the legend, it grew, as all dark tales do. The elevator at the back of the building still stood, waiting for the next curious soul, brave or foolish, enough to step inside. And as the doors opened, the whispers of the shadows echoed, welcoming the new passenger into the depths of terror.